puppeteers and play the characters that you cheer. So join us as we go below the frame. On this episode of Below the Frame, I'm talking to Leigh Slaughter and Michael Steinbach from the Muppets Studio. Leigh and Michael run the studio, and we're going to hear their thoughts on where the Muppets are headed now and into the future. We will also be visiting the Injury Corner, and we'll ask a puppeteer a question about not puppets. So here we go. It's time for Below the Frame. Woo! Go below the frame. Welcome to Below the Frame with me, Matt Vogel. If you like our little podcast, please rate and review it. And that is the phrase that I'm supposed to say because I guess everybody says that on their podcast. I don't know. Hey, listen, today we are going to talk to Leigh Slaughter and Michael Steinbach from the Muppets Studio. They're my bosses at the Muppet Studio. And it's a great chat. You get to hear all about Leigh, where she came from, and Michael, where he came from, and then we're going to talk about the Muppets. We talk about Muppets Now. We talk about Muppets Haunted Mansion, and we just talk about a lot of things. Are there any surprises in here? Well, I don't want to give anything away. Just let you listen for yourself. So if you are ready, I am. Let's go below the frame with the Muppets Studio. Leigh Slaughter and Michael Steinbach from the Muppet Studio. Welcome to Below the Frame. How are you guys doing?
Great. How are you? Good to see you.
Well. Yeah, it's good to see you too. You know, normally I have this template of questions that I ask the Muppet Performer or whoever it is I'm interviewing, and we're going to do a little bit of that here in this interview, but I think that this one's going to be a bit different because we'll be talking about the Muppet Studio in particular, and as many things as I can get you to talk about without giving away any super secret surprises that we may or may not have up our sleeves. Does that sound agreeable to both of you?
Sure.
Yeah.
Michael stole.
We can edit afterwards.
That's right. So, but first off, I am going to formally introduce you to the listeners with your title, and I just would like you to tell us what that means. Okay, so what kind of duties you're doing at the Muppet Studio? Okay, so Michael Steinbach, the producer and manager of the Muppet Studio, what do you do?
I wear a lot of different hats, which I think is very common of a producer. But mainly my focus is on taking the creative, figuring out how to budget and schedule it so that it fits into everyone's timelines and deliverables. And in the meantime, you know, I lean into the creative and what are we delivering? What are the stories? What's happening with it? Try to plus it, make sure every dollar that I'm given is trying to hit the screen so that we're delivering the best product we can to fans.
So you're kind of doing, it's like a creative and a business kind of role, really.
Yeah, I ride the line between, a creative producer and like a line producer or a production manager. I have a little bit of influence over both sides, but my main trajectory is making sure that we deliver financially and schedulally, what was planned out, and that we're delivering the best thing we can with every dollar that I'm given.
And Leigh Slaughter, you are the vice president of Muppet Studio and live character strategy. What the heck does that mean?
Well, that means, like many of us at the Walt Disney Company, we have the pleasure of having more than one job. So with the Muppet Studio, my responsibilities are basically anything to do with the Muppets. And so from the earliest stage, it's looking at what's our 3 to 5 year plan, and then how do we activate that across the entire Walt Disney Company? How do we activate all of our other partners to support all Muppet projects? What are the right projects for us to be doing? What are the guardrails? What does our brand stand for? Really making sure that we take care of the Muppets. I'm going to say as a business, but really the business of the Muppets all comes from the creation of creative content. So it's really sort of, watching the flow of the entire business. What are the right projects for us to accept? What should we be targeting? And what's the right positioning of each of the characters, actually, because there's such nuance in the different characters that when they come together, it means one thing, but then when they're separated, they can also have, value in standing for their own interests. And then the line character strategies, that's my Disney focus, which is anything that characters are doing outside of parks and resorts. That's a whole other session.
Yeah. So you two, along with just dozens and dozens and dozens of other people, make up the Muppet Studio. Isn't that correct, Michael?
No. It has been a ragtag group of 3 for a while.
Okay, well, who's the third?
David Lightbody is the head of the Muppet Studios.
He's the senior vice president at Disney Live Entertainment, and he kind of helps lead the charge as well, right?
Yes.
So there are some others that are in the Muppet Studio universe, but it really is like you guys are kind of the day-to-day soldiers that kind of help keep this little ragtag group of characters moving on down the road. We have somebody named Danny Iglesias, who is she's our creative resource development manager at the Muppet Studio. She's very artistic and does a lot of like what does she do? She's doing like art, whether it's for logos or whether it's for merchandise, things like that. Is that right?
Yes. And she became part of the Muppet Studio officially right around Thanksgiving this year.
Yeah, she's awesome.
So she's wonderful, and yes, she's looking at how the Muppets are represented in images, in line art, logos, brand management, all those types of things, which again span everything from how they're appearing in creative content to digital trading cards.
And you did mention, Leigh, a little bit earlier, you said, brand management and guardrails.
Yes.
A bunch of other little things. I'm going to ask you about some of those things, and like a 3 to 5 year plan, stuff like that. I'm going to ask you about that in a little bit.
Matt, we have one other person who's just come on with the Muppets full time.
Really? Who?
Yes, breaking news.
Really?
Yeah.
Who is it?
His name is Andy Turner.
Oh.
And I've worked with Andy many years in sort of, our past roles within the Walt Disney Company. And he is fantastic when it comes to process and all of the organization side of things. So he's our new Muppet Studio coordinator. We're
great. Well,
so thrilled to
Andy.
have Danny and now Andy come on.
Oh, that's great. We just got to keep building that. And then, soon we will have those dozens and dozens of other people that are going to help push this train up the hill. What is it called?
Yeah.
Boulder? I don't know. Anyway.
And there's a lot of other people who support us. Yeah, like Frank Reifschneider, who helps us in PR and media relations, and
who
Tony
may or may
Shepard.
not be listening in on this very conversation right now. But yeah, that's right. You consult with other Disney folks in different departments to determine the worthiness or the relevance or whether it's not something that the Muppets should or should not do. Is that right?
Yeah, and even down to, we have a casting person who works with us who's just looking at, what talent we're associated with. We have, as we said before, brand management folks, communications folks, franchise folks. We have people that support us throughout consumer products, games, and publishing. So while there's only a few people right now who actually have the Muppet Studio written on their business card, I think what we've been able to do over the past couple of years is just sort of reach out to almost every department we can connect within the Walt Disney Company and activate partnerships and support within all those other lines of business.
It does take a bunch of people to put any kind of franchise together and kind of get it moving and working properly, I think, right?
Yeah. I mean, and the supports that what we've had from parks and resorts even has been great. We just, as you know, finished a little bit of a sort of, special appearances at Disneyland Resort and
we'll
the
talk
team
about
there.
that.
They just sort of became an extension of our team for the duration of that show. So
that's exciting. And okay, before we talk any more about the Muppets or the Muppet Studio or anything like that, I want to know a little bit more about the both of you. And we're going to start with Michael. Michael, where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Northern California in a little suburb called Danville. And
where is that, like, in the world?
It's in the East Bay, from San Francisco, Oakland. So we're in the East Bay, and moved up there when I was 7 years old, and there were only a couple signals in the little main street. It was this very idyllic environment, nice parks and the Little League, and it was a wonderful little place to grow up. I'm the fourth of 5 boys. So we had like a horde that would just take over neighborhoods, and my poor mother.
What were the kind of things that you did as a kid?
I loved drawing and art, and I started making like scripts and stories kind of around 7 or 8. I thought I was going to be a novelist, I think, when I was like 8 years old. And then discovered you could record audio on like a Walkman, and started doing like our own impromptu radio dramas. And then my brother got us a video camera for Christmas one year to like record our family moments. And I basically stole it and started making movies with my best friend when I was around 12. And so it started with that.
You ended up going to NYU to study film, isn't that right?
I did. I discovered late that it was actually a career option to do that. I don't know why it didn't dawn on me. I'm watching movies, I'm watching TV shows, and yet somehow it never dawned on me like, oh, there's an actual career in that. It was just this thing I loved. So when I graduated high school, I couldn't quite get into the universities I wanted because I didn't apply myself in the way I should. I wish I had. It's the thing I'm trying to improve in my son. He's on a much better track than I am. But I did the junior college route, and then I transferred into NYU. It was a wonderful experience. Eric Jacobson, also an NYU Tisch alum. So I studied filmmaking, writing, directing, producing at NYU, and then moved back to California after graduating. Was back down in LA 7 months after graduating from college to try to start this little career in the movie industry, entertainment.
And how did you end up finding your way to the Muppet Studio? You did do some film work.
Yeah, I did. I started in feature films as just like a production assistant. When I was in high school, I worked in restaurants. And by the time I graduated high school, I was managing a restaurant. And that's kind of how I paid for college, was managing my brother's restaurant. And then I went to NYU, and my very first job, I got my job because I had worked in restaurants for 6 years, not because I went to NYU, because they wanted someone to handle picking up lunches for very important people and make sure that those lunches were done correctly. So, I have to thank my brother for my early career in restaurants, because it's what got me my first job, which got me my second and my third and every job since. So I started out on a movie called Stuart Little 2 as a production assistant. It was my very first job as just an office PA. And I kind of lived in the physical production world from movie to movie. Did that for a number of years before taking a job at Universal Pictures. And at Universal, I was a coordinator assigned to a physical production executive. And that's where we really focused on budget, schedule, and how a movie got made. And I worked with line producers, production managers, and producers for, 60-something movies in an 8-year span. A lot of really fun, Jurassic World and Straight Outta Compton, all kinds of great fun movies. And then left that job and went back to freelance, did a season of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And
it's one of my son Jack's favorite shows.
It was really, really fun. I always was excited to get a script because I knew I was going to laugh. It was a really fun show. Very short, very tight, quick turnaround. And then I was unemployed after that show ended, and I didn't want to be unemployed, and all the TV shows were already crewed up, and I had a window until the mid-seasons started. And so I applied to a temp agency, and they dropped me on a desk at Disney, and that desk was the Muppet Studios. And the rest kind of like, oh, these people are amazing. This is fun. I'm getting to learn things. 15 years into my career, I'm getting to learn things because I was in television and features. I wasn't doing commercials or live events or live TV interview. So instantly it was like, oh, I get to wear all these different hats. I get to learn so much. And then obviously you performers, Jim Lewis, everyone's so nice and so much fun. How could you not love what you were doing? And so I feel very fortunate that I, had this previous career in entertainment and then trip and fell into this amazing experience with the Muppets. It's really, really brought great joy to my life to join this group.
Well, we're very lucky to have you, Michael. And now let's get some background from Leigh. Leigh, you did not grow up in America. Something tells me you didn't grow up in America.
I know, you're sharp, Matt.
Where are you from?
I did not. I grew up in Sydney, Australia, and spent my whole childhood there, and I'm still getting used to things like cold Christmases in the United States.
Right.
It's a completely different culture. And so I did that and was really working in special events. I joined the Walt Disney Company, this is going to date me, for the launch of Beauty and the Beast.
Oh.
Yeah. So a long, long, long time ago. And
were you in Australia at the time?
I was in Australia at the time, yeah. And we had a show that was touring Australia that was basically promoting the launch of this new film, Beauty and the Beast, which is still one of my absolute favorites. And so I had signed on to do that show for about 6 months. And then Aladdin was coming out. We were asked to take a group of performers to Tokyo for the big launch event for Aladdin. And while we were there, the team that we reported to out of Disneyland met us in Tokyo, did a fantastic big launch event for Aladdin. And they said, would you like a full-time job with Disney? And I said, well, I could give it a shot. And they said, well, you've got to move to Melbourne, which is south of Sydney. So I said, well, let's give this a try for 6 months. And then, I could just jump to the end and say the rest is history. But I tell you, it's been a phenomenal ride. And one thing that I learned very on in my career, the first producer I had was from Disneyland. He was the original producer of the show Fantasmic when it very first started.
Yeah. And
he said, every time you get on a plane, just say, thank you, Mickey, for taking me somewhere that I wasn't planning to go otherwise. And we were it was a great time back then because businesses like the Disney Channel, Disney stores were just launching. And our group was responsible for the live entertainment in 18 countries across the Asia Pacific, China, Japan, and India. So it was just years of being constantly on the road in those countries, taking shows in, setting them up and bouncing to the next country and setting up another show in that country. Disney's been great for me. Disney's taken me around the world. And so, I've got to work on so many different amazing projects. I've also got to see incredible places. And then I met my husband actually when we were both working in Hong Kong, and he's American. And we said, well, when we get married, let's try living in the United States and see if I can stay with Disney. He, of course, is with Disney. And so that's how we ended up here with 3 children.
Yeah.
So, there's some gaps in that. But, that's basically how it went. And then, so much of what you do at Disney, there's so much to learn in every role that you're in, so many different people to connect with. but then a lot of it also is, being in the right place at the right time. And that's how I feel I was lucky enough to become part of the Muppet Studio in 2019. That's when I, I've said this before, that's when I was offered the job that I never knew I always wanted. And,
Same experience.
It was same experience, it's, the other two people who are full-time in our studio, Andy and Danny, they both say the same thing. Oh, wow, we just, who would have thought that we'd all end up here, working with the Muppets and be able to still be part of Disney, which, we've all been here a long time, but find this avenue into a whole different area. And, the Muppets are a very unique part of this company, not just because, they came from somewhere else. Obviously we all know where they came from, the Henson Company and Jim Henson, but they have such a unique place in the world that it's fun to be part of something that's so different, but still within such a sort of an enormous corporation.
Were you a fan of the Muppets, Leigh?
Yes, I was. I was even part of a Sesame Street touring show in Australia and New Zealand many, many, many years. I'll just say the 1990s.
Well, I remember early on, and maybe it was the first time we met in person. I'm not sure. I think it was.
I know when you came to the office.
Yeah, and I went into your office, and you had a picture on your wall in your office of you in the Sesame Street Live show in Australia. You know the one I'm talking about, of course.
Yes.
So how long did you do that?
That was for about 18 months.
So you've had a connection with the Muppets since, for quite a while. I mean, that was around the time, if I remember correctly, also, that was around the time that Jim passed away.
Yeah, it was. And we were performing that day. And I remember it very clearly, getting that news. Not that, we had ever met him, but I do remember on our very first day, opening day in Sydney, we did get a letter from the Henson Company wishing us luck. And I remember we all thought we were just, so special. Like, how did they know that this group of performers all the way out in Australia were about to open a show? I mean, of course they knew, but to us, it was just something so memorable that we would get that acknowledgement from them.
It's really nice. I mean, it does make you feel like you're part of something bigger when something like that happens, I think. So here you both are. You've both landed at the Muppet Studio. And,
thankfully,
for being the Muppets, it is a surprisingly small operation. Mm-hmm. Have either of you worked in a setting like this where it is, or it has been only you and like maybe a few others? Or is this unique? In
big corporations like Disney, it feels very unique. But yes, I mean, coming out of, independent movies and short films and student films and stuff like that, you just have to find your way to be scrappy and do this type of stuff. So I definitely lean into that when it comes to how to achieve more with less and how to multitask. I mean, it really is. That was the biggest thing, was just finding out how to order events so that you're achieving as much as you can with the time that you have. But that said, Leigh and David, there really has been a shift in the business where we truly are dramatically integrated within Disney now. And I'm starting to see, like she spoke about earlier, games and publishing and product and we just are so tied in now, parks and the things that we're getting to expose ourselves to now, that we did just this last Christmas, and you and I in Florida for the Destination D23 appearance. Those are all things that are just really fun and exciting that, Leigh and David have really opened doors for the Muppets.
I think you're right. I was just thinking, this just popped into my head just now. For so many years, it did kind of feel like the Muppet Studio was like adrift at sea and just like alone. I mean, that was just my impression, being a part kind of on, from my point of view. But I do feel like in the couple of years since you guys have been here that it really does feel like we are now part of the machine. We're part in the best way. We are no longer at sea. We are, docked, and we are supported by everything around us. And I only see that growing and being more positive as we move along.
Yeah, no, and look, I'm a little bit of a bridge between the previous leadership and the new leadership, and I guess we were a little bit like a rogue group that was like just doing everything we could to achieve, and I also was really proud of all the stuff we achieved in that time period as well. But
Absolutely.
There does seem to be like a trajectory and a focus. We have been absorbed into the Disney group in a very great way that is opening doors for us and creating opportunities that seems very different between the two time periods.
Yeah, I think you also find out, oh my gosh, I love the Muppets. I want to help out. I love the Muppets. I want to help. People from different departments and different areas of the company really want to be a part of what's happening.
Absolutely. And, our chairman now, Josh D'Amaro, he's a huge Muppet fan.
Yeah.
So, we have great support across the company. And, the reason that we ended up at Disneyland over the holiday period was because one of the show directors there, Jordan Peterson, and one of the producers there, Trevor Sloan, they're Muppet fans. And they came to us and said, we have this crazy idea. Would you be up for it? We're like, sure.
Yeah.
Why not? So I think it's allowing people from across the Walt Disney Company to have a little bit more access to the Muppets, to open our doors. And we're still very careful about what's right for the Muppets, what's the right thing for us to do to ensure that the Muppets themselves are on the right track. But yeah, the thing I say to a lot of people when we're meeting with, people from different areas is, when you're thinking about Disney and you're thinking about plans for the future, everyone thinks Disney, Pixar, Lucas, Marvel. Just add the next M there as well, Muppets. And so keep the Muppets top of mind because, as I said earlier, they bring such a different sense of humor, a different sensibility, and there's a different way you can play with Muppets in the real world than you can with any of those other brands. So they bring each of those brands under the company umbrella brings a unique value, and I think the Muppets, add to that in a very unique way.
I agree. At the start of your time with the Muppets, you had to come up with a plan. Mm-hmm. You mentioned it earlier, the 3 to 5 year plan.
Yes.
What can you share with us about that plan without, giving away any secrets, of course, but, what was your vision for what you saw from the Muppets over the course of 3 to 5 years?
Well, I think the Muppets, they just didn't have we didn't have a clear understanding of what the Muppets should be doing creatively. And, one of the things I've learned is so valuable from working as part of Imagineering I joined Imagineering, 2008. And one of the things we're always looking at is what we call the menu. What's happening to all the parks over the next 5, 10, 15 years to make sure that every decision we make today is in line with where we want to be 10 years from now. And if we're ever going to stray from that, it's not to say you can't be spontaneous and make other decisions. But if you're ever going to stray from that, you just need to make sure that, that's not detracting from the roadmap that you've laid out. And so I think what we really wanted to do was get back to who are the Muppets? What should they be? What should they stand for? What are the real relationships between each of these characters that made them the most successful? And how do we get back there? How do we choose the right projects to get them where I want them to be? And I know where, I will admit, I do look into social media quite often and see what the fans are saying. So, because it's a bit of a gut check too. So what do the fans want from us? And I think the message is usually pretty clear. So, where should we be? What should our major goals be, and what should our secondary goals be? And I can tell you that, we did put it out into the universe. I remember we met while we were shooting the Facebook Portal campaign. We all went to a little room out the back of that soundstage. The 6 core performers and Michael and David Lightbody. And it was supposed to be a casual conversation, and David said, no, show them the plan you come up with. I was like, oh, no, it's not ready. But it was great to sort of get the initial reaction on, what should our main goal be, and what are all of the secondary projects we should be taking on to support that and take us, along this journey. So without revealing too much, I can tell you that we're definitely on our way. We have some projects that are in sort of blue sky development right now, and we have some that are on their way to becoming a reality sooner rather than later. How about that?
Yeah.
How about I offer you that?
That's amazing.
I was going to say that meeting she's talking about
Yeah.
was like an amazing trigger point for me within the company as well, because that was when all the performers, myself, Leigh, David, we all got together and we kind of got to see this picture of where things could go. And it really triggered, and the way that we were being included in, like, how do we get here? What do you want to do to bring this to reality? It was like how we started to really, truly incorporate you performers in how what is something you want to see? And it's resulted in, Muppets Haunted Mansion, Bill writing and producing. And it does feel like we are really come together in a great way from that moment forward. And for me, it allowed me to be inspired to be like, how do I be a part of this? And it's, been so wonderful to see it. Each step keeps going further and further.
I think you're right, Michael. I think you're right. I think that meeting, and I didn't really reflect on it until now, but I think that meeting, we had all talked with each other in various phone calls or in meetings or whatever. But this was kind of that first time where all of us knew what the vision was moving forward. And I think that maybe that meeting solidified us as the Muppet Studio, as this group of people moving forward with the same singular vision. And that's right. That's when I think that's when that happened. That's so cool.
And I want to say it was in some beautiful room at the studios, and we had a lovely view of the studio lot. But it actually was not. It was as unglamorous as it gets.
Yeah.
It
crappy lunchroom or something.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was awful. I think we were pulling chairs from other rooms because there wasn't enough space. It was
It was like a room that hadn't been vacuumed in 2 years. No, it was like a closed office that no one had ever opened in years at some stage in the middle of, I don't know. It was Simi Valley or something. Like, it was just like out in the middle of nowhere.
We'll be back with the Muppet Studio in a few minutes, but first, just waiting for the door knock, but there's no door knock. Nobody's knocking at the door. Anybody out there? No, nobody's out there. That's weird. He's usually here, but I guess maybe he's not available. This is the part where Jack would come in, but he's not here, so I will throw to the injury corner.
Oh, I got to stand up. Okay. Let me just go for anyone.
David Rudman, welcome to the Injury Corner.
Nice to be here.
Yes. Let me talk here for a second.
Okay, please.
I don't have anything to say. Have you ever had an injury while you were puppeteering?
I have. I was doing Muppet meeting films back in, maybe it was like the 80s, early 80s. We were shooting a scene where there was a character outside this window, and they had, and they had to drop a safe on him. Like a safe had to fall from like above the window and hit this character and have him like fall out of frame. So I was like a young guy. They're like, why don't you play the guy who's hanging out the window that has the safe fall on him? I'm like, okay. So I go out there and I'm kind of, leaning so you could see him through the window. So I had to lean kind of out a little bit. And they dropped the safe, and it wasn't like, it was a safe. It wasn't like a prop safe.
It was a real safe?
I think it was. I mean, maybe it wasn't like it was small, but it was like a safe.
Yeah.
And it falls and it clips my shoulder as it's going down. And that hurt. That was that was a bad injury. I was fine, but it just like, it wasn't like, it didn't dislocate my shoulder or anything, but it was like a really bad bruise and it hurt. So that was it. I was like the stunt puppeteer for a day and got a safe dropped on me.
Got a safe dropped on you. There you go. That's what happens when you're a puppeteer sometimes.
Yeah.
Get a safe dropped on you.
Yeah, and when you're the new guy, you become the stunt puppeteer. That's what happens.
That's right. So look forward to that.
This one from anyone.
Okay, now back to the. Come in,
Dad.
Jack. I'm sorry. You're too late. You missed it.
What?
Well, you missed it, so I just did it.
Whoa. You threw to the injury corner by yourself?
Well, yeah. I mean, you weren't here. There was no knock, and so.
I see. Okay. No, that's fine. It's okay.
I'm sorry, Jack. I didn't know that it meant so much to you.
Nah, it doesn't. I'm fine. Seriously, I just like making you feel guilty.
Yeah.
So, if there's nothing else,
you can go.
Yeah.
Go, 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 below the frame.
Now back with Leigh Slaughter and Michael Steinbach from the Muppets Studio.
The difference with Muppets, is, as Michael said, including you performers, because in trying to immerse myself in the Muppets, I was a fan, but I didn't know about the business. I didn't know about, how it all actually worked until, we were thrown together. But it's very unique. You're so much a part of your characters and they're so much a part of you. And, that there's a generosity with Muppet performers where it's so you, and yet you completely remove yourself from it. You're not in the limelight, and we do our best to get you out of shot whenever possible. So it's but it just watching how you did that. The thing that I remember thinking is how, and you're all so dedicated. You're all so dedicated to the character and the background story of who these characters are. So how can I ask you to do anything that doesn't ring true to that character and put you in a position where, if it doesn't ring true, it's never going to be as successful as if you can fully, give over to it. And I think there's, there's been some storylines in the past where, I've spoken to each one of you and I've heard, this was a bit of a challenge because I wasn't sure that my character would really do that or say that. So it was a real learning for me as well to understand sort of how invested you are, and not because it's your job and you're contracted to do it, but because you have a genuine love for these characters. And so getting them back, I don't know another way to say it, but just to a place where they can be true to themselves and true to the original intent of who they were and why they were that way. That was the most important thing when we were thinking about what the plan for the future should be. And I think it's the most important thing, and Michael and I talk about this on most projects going forward. What is the intent here? Why are the Muppets here? Who are the right Muppets to be there? What are they saying? How are they being positioned? Because without that sense of honesty and truth, it's only going to, sort of dilute them over the years, and then they're not, as powerful as they were. And, that, so a lot of that comes from Jim Lewis as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He doesn't
he's
just
definitely
write the
part of
words,
team.
he guides us as well. And to have, to be blessed with still having him involved, as well as all of the performers is, he's not one that's often sort of, out there, being credited or sort of out for people to see, but he is definitely a driving force.
Yeah, and he knows the characters,
Oh, yeah.
I mean, back and forth. And, Leigh, you mentioned earlier on, and this also relates to this, guardrails. Guardrails for the Muppet Studio. So something that other companies do create, it's kind of like a direction on how the brand is to be represented, right? Can you tell us what are the Muppet guardrails, or what do those do for us?
Well, I think they sort of, they let anyone know, any other department within Disney, we call them lines of business. If you want to work with the Muppets, here are the values that we want to ensure we stick to. Here's what it's like working with the Muppets. I'm not sure that any other, I guess it must exist somewhere in the world, but one of our very first guardrails is, if you would like to work with live Muppets, please know the performers will be fully involved in the creative. Again, it's going back to, if you can't buy into it, we can't offer a sincere, true performance. You're all great actors. I don't mean to say anything other than that, but it's, but there's always going to be, that sincerity that we're looking for. So, what do the Muppets stand for? And I think what we've heard, time and time again as we are sort of researching the characters and, hearing stories from Dave Goelz, who's, legend.
Oh, yeah.
They're about inclusion, and there's a purity and a joy and a lack of cynicism that they will always put themselves as the butt of the joke. And to me, that's a graciousness with the Muppets. But we have to stick to that, and we have to make sure that they don't, while they can be contemporary, they know the world that we live in, they know what's happening in pop culture. We don't want their personalities to change. We want them to remain the same, and let them exist within the world without being too affected by it.
Yeah, and that's a tricky little balancing act to do for everything that comes through, I think.
Yeah.
But that is why I think it's important, and not just because I am one of the Muppet performers, but that is why I think it's important to have the performers involved, because we will see it from the point of view of the characters, and there might be a time when we go, oh yeah, that'll be fine.
Yeah.
I know that it's not maybe what he might say or they might say in this moment, but I think that might work. This might work, or that's not going to work.
Yeah. I remember the first year we were working together. So this was Christmas 2019. You and Michael went to London for Kermit to make an appearance at Royal Albert Hall. So I remember reading the script, and I read it. I said, well, this sounds good. Great. And then you were over there, and Michael said, he called me and he said, so we've got to change the script a little bit because there was a local celebrity in the UK. And Matt, you knew that Kermit had met this celebrity previously. But the script was written in a way that seemed like they were just meeting for the first time. And that may seem like it's just like a small nuance, but for you to have that history of Kermit in your mind, so when that celebrity and Kermit were meeting again, it was a reunion of old friends rather than a first meeting. Again, that's just, the truth of Kermit and the history of Kermit continuing to exist. And that's really tough.
It is, because we've been on so many things before I was Kermit, and even then before Steve was Kermit, and then it goes back so far, and to have that knowledge, thank goodness for Muppet Wiki, thank goodness for Jim Lewis. It's so helpful to have those things, because you can just go like, Jim, did we ever do this thing? And he'll oftentimes say, oh yeah, we did something like that in the Muppet magazine. He'll know things like that you can go to, but it is important to have that history.
Well, because that celebrity was going to remember that they had met Kermit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Michael, with projects like the Royal Albert Hall and things maybe not being right or being right, and that's like something that happened when we got there.
Yeah.
But you're probably looking at stuff like way before we even land in a country to do something or on set to go and be in something, right? I mean, what's the involvement there that you're doing over the whole process?
Yeah, well, on every project that is seen, there's a multitude of projects that are not seen. And it's because we're going through all those guardrail processes of, what is the messaging? What is it? How are the characters presented? What is the creative? Is it worthy of the opportunity? But then also the logistics of it. How much money do we have? Where is it? Who are the characters? Can we do at this point now seeds? What are the other characters that fit? Like, there's all these processes. So, there's a big portion of my job that is about cutting a project away rather than just what hits. I'm not working only on the things that go. I'm working on every project that comes through us. And we at the Muppet Studios now really try to get things into the hands of the performers early as well, so that we are massaging and shifting creative to the right spot before we're agreeing to a budget number and a schedule and start getting people signing contracts and things. So it is about the process of finding what is a go project versus what isn't, ticking whatever box it is, whether it's schedule, budget, or creative.
I'll talk a little bit more about that, really about the creative of the Muppet Studio in just a second, but I wanted to take a second to just chat about some smaller things that the Muppets find themselves involved in all the time. We do advertising. There's a long history of the Muppets being in commercials, way back to the beginnings with the Wilkins coffee commercials. And recently, the Muppets have done Facebook portal, I think Leigh mentioned, and a Geico ad with Animal, and there was an Adidas shoe collaboration. And but Leigh, what kind of product or partner makes a good fit for the Muppets now?
Well, of course, there's a whole assessment that we do of any company that we want to be associated with. That's the business side. For us, when we're looking at those opportunities, if all of the boxes are checked on the business side, then we have to ask, what are the Muppets being asked to do? If entertainment is first and foremost, and that advertising message comes second, then that's when it's usually the right project for us. We want to make sure that even when it's a commercial, that it's entertaining, great content where the Muppets can still be true to their characters and that they can still perform in a way that, is amusing or heartfelt or whatever the messaging is. But we want to make sure that they're always the entertainers. So I think, I love the couple that Animal has sort of moved in with on the Geico commercial. Right. I love those commercials because you walk away going, they're so funny. They're so fun. Yeah. Yes, it's, then it's okay for us to sort of be included with that. With the Adidas one, we go back and forth on the pronunciation of that. It was a really sweet moment with Kermit and Stan Smith. That was just, a nice heartfelt moment of the two of them together. So I think, there's the creative side as well as the business side of, assessing the association with that company.
Yeah.
And Michael, when you're talking to a new partner, what are the kind of things that you need to educate that partner about in terms of the Muppets? Just like you're going in.
It's a big.
How long you got?
It's a big part of my job. It's just interesting. Look, and Muppet fans obviously know so much about how we achieve what we achieve, but it's interesting how few productions consider how those things get achieved. And so on everything, it is really, we've had, so many questions. We've seen people put microphones on the puppet and like, yep, that's not going to get anything. There's no sounds coming out of that guy.
Which on the one hand makes you think, man, they really believe in these characters.
100%. All it does is solidify that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing.
We're doing something right.
So it is truly trying to get them to understand how to execute, what is feasible, what isn't. But mainly it's about trying to make sure they understand, hey, how do these characters create an eye line? and connect to an audience and connect to the person they're performing with. And it's about how do we achieve that? And so that's the biggest education point on every single production, is really talking through what are the logistics that allow that performance to land in the very connected way that it's meant to. Then when we have, obviously we work with you, Matt, and with Bill Beretta as puppet captains. And it's such a great, having that voice in the room is truly, truly helpful on each project, because you're talking from a performer standpoint, but also the logistics standpoint. And it carries just so much weight when they hear Kermit saying, oh, it's best if I have this. And then it's so easy to get things. Whereas
I need
when
a
it's
monitor.
just me,
I have to have a monitor.
When it's just me saying the thing, there's a lot of like, yeah, but that costs $1. And do we need it? Like, yes.
Right.
In order to deliver
Well, and the other
Kermit,
thing is, and I know what
you
your
have to
answer is, when you go somewhere and they're like, do you need a Wrangler?
yeah. Oh my gosh.
What is your answer for
Well,
this?
it's evolved. Now I've really landed in a place of like, okay, so this is the same as any other celebrity. This celebrity that's coming on your show is as big as anyone you've ever had on your show. And those people come with a hair person, a makeup person, a costumer, and a manager that's making sure you're going to ask questions that don't go against the way they want their person to be presented. That's the exact same thing for Kermit the Frog, except for the Wrangler is the makeup, hair, and costumer all in one. You're getting a bargain price for this. I guarantee it. And so that's been
great. That's a great.
That's been the way of getting them to grasp what it is. Because very often they're like, "But I have a costumer."
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, your customer doesn't know my puppet.
Definitely not going to be able to fit clothes on them.
Although we have been asked that.
Oh, many times.
What?
Yeah.
Yes, many times people say, "Well, we'll provide you with what we would like Miss Piggy to wear," for example. And we're like,
okay,
she's this big.
Let's talk about fabrics, and we'll build it. How about that? Let's start talking about fabrics, and and I'll tell you how much it costs to make it.
Yeah. And this, kind of links in with, the Muppets having a history of appearing on other people's shows. Yeah. Ed Sullivan's show all the way back, and all the way up to Kermit just recently appearing on Michael Bublé's Christmas in the City special. And I know, and these same things that you've already spoken about are in play anytime we go to be on somebody else's show. What are the ones that work really particularly well?
Well, I loved the one recently you mentioned with Kermit and Michael Bublé, because it was fun. And I know that, Kermit and Mr. Bublé are now, besties.
That's right. That's friends. That's right.
But it's, when they can come in, add a bit of magic, and then be on their way, and keeping it short, I think is the key to it when it's not our story. When it's someone else's story and we want to be a cameo, just like when we invite celebrities to be cameos in Muppets. So I think it's, it's knowing our place and again, why are we there and what are we bringing to this? Are we adding value to this show? And what does this collaboration mean? And, Matt, it's funny, when people first call me, you ask, how does Michael educate people? There's two types of production calls I usually get. In the initial sort of pitching of an idea, it's people coming in saying, I've got a great idea and here it is. Or it's people coming in and saying, I've got a great idea and I've worked with the Muppets before, so I understand the complexity. Anyone who's done it before will always put that up front and say, I understand what I'm about to tell you, and I understand how complex this is going to be. Every time we finish an appearance with, on someone else's show, and we've been through that process, we always get, people coming to us at the end saying, now I get it. It's hard to understand until you've lived through it. And then they go, okay, really now I got it.
Yeah, and that brings me up to Muppets Now, which was something that was produced by the Muppet Studio. And you both had input in that process, right?
I joined the Muppet Studio 8 days before you began filming. Right. So I did have some questions.
Yes.
Yes.
And I did.
Yeah, but you know what? The fun thing that I wanted to say about that was, like, you don't know what it is until you are in it, right? You you, if I remember correctly, this was the first day that we were with you that you were with us on set.
Yes.
And you sat down 3 feet away from Dave Goelz as he was performing Bunsen.
Yes.
You were right there watching everything.
Yes.
Watching how he looked at the monitors, watching how the assists worked, watching how the whole process was being put together. Were you just trying to give yourself a crash course in what the hell we're doing?
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And that was tough. That was a baptism of fire, but I would not change it at all, because just like all those outside, partners that I just mentioned, if I had worked with the Muppets for, 6 months and then filmed something, I might have formed some, thoughts or opinions on what it might be like. But to, on week 2, be sitting with you all in person, because you're scattered all over the country. So it's not all that often that we're all together. So to be there week 2 and be able to ask you questions like, how are you going to do this? I remember saying, is this funny? And then
That's what we say all the time.
And the director said to me, if we had a bit more money, it could be funnier. I said, all right, let me go and find a little bit more money for you for a certain sort of segment that we were doing. But it was, to learn what that's all about. And then I have a very clear memory of you were doing the right hand for Bunsen one day, and we were out in a parking lot. It was so hot.
Yeah, July. Yeah. Shooting
so
in
hot.
July.
And I was and I was sitting under the table watching the monitors at your feet, watching you, and you said you didn't tell Dave, and you said, come on, stand up here, and you slipped your arm out of Bunsen's and you helped me get my arm in. And for a rehearsal shot, it wasn't the actual shot, but for a rehearsal shot, you said, you try doing this. And I was like, oh no, I'm going to ruin the shot. I'm going to dislocate Dave's shoulder. It's terrifying. But it's the only way to really learn and understand is to live through it. And now, I'm never going to put myself out there and say I could ever really do it in real life. But having had that pressure on me to say, okay, try this. I've tried the puppets on. I've felt the weight of them. I've tried to hold my arm up in the air for as long as you do. And it's to understand the physicality of the job is a whole different ball game than understanding the performance and the creative side, because they have to live together seamlessly or you're going to fail. Either one of them isn't working and the whole thing crashes. And we read scripts all the time, and Michael and I go, so what do you reckon this is? Whoa, we're like 10, 11, 12 minutes in and no one's put their arm down yet. Let's try this again. So
figure out how we can do that.
It's going to be a balance. And I mean, just a blessing to be there. I mean, it was a shock to have chickens and screaming goats coming at me, and I would sit with Michael and say, I don't know what is going on here. And he was like, well,
this is all normal.
this is normal. And yes, like there is nothing normal about this.
It's Muppets normal.
But it's so unique. Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, it was so exciting to see it, especially as someone who was a fan previously, that I was calling. This was, before we had restrictions on set. This was before, the pandemic. But I was calling everybody saying, you have to. We had our finance department come through. We had HR, music. Everyone we could get, because the Muppets had just moved to Imagineering, which is, where I got to join the party. And everyone at Imagineering. Anyone should come and watch this. This is amazing. Let's all be educated. And still, people, like I said, people from the finance department are still talking about, remember that day when we walked, through the Muppet set and you were all, again, so gracious with everybody we brought in. But, having everybody in sort of who we're connected with be educated on this process just helps everybody support us in a way that's, so unique. But I agree. That was crazy times.
That's a brilliant thought there, to think like, well, if this is what I think of this, I need to get people over here to see what this is, because it's not at all what I thought. and they need to see this. And in a way, it benefited the relationship between the Muppet Studio and everybody else at Disney. And we now have this a little bit more of an understanding of what each other does.
Well, I think the biggest misconception is that the puppeteer and the voice performance is separate.
Right.
And time again, I see people, again, as a fan, I had seen it previously, but I had never seen it up close like that. But then having other people come in and just see that shock time and time again of, oh my gosh, this is what it is. They have to do everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, and be funny.
Yeah.
And do it for 12 hours a day. I mean, some of those shoot days are long.
Yeah.
Yeah, and with Muppets Now, that was a show that was intended in a different way, right? It was intended to be shorts, and then it was intended not to be shorts, and the group of us kind of had to think of how this could now be not shorts, but 6 episodes.
6
Is that what we
Yes.
did of Muppets Now?
6 episodes.
And how can we make them into like episode 1, episode 2, episode 3? How did that come about?
Well, we had everything in the can, and then the shift happened in post. And so then from there, we tried to find like what are connective tissues between the sketches that were previously shot in one way. And then how do we interweave a connective tissue? And that was, Scooter from home.
Well, and it was from home for a very
because the
specific
pandemic
reason.
had already happened and we had to shoot all of it from home.
Because we were all at home.
Yes. So that project
Right?
in general, like Leigh said, she was 2 weeks into it. I was promoted to a production manager on the set. Like everything, it is the growing of the Muppet Studios. It was like she said, the trial by fire moment of like, hey, here's this thing that's going. Let's see what we can, how to do it. And then things morphed. But, at all times it was being considerate and thoughtful to like, okay, but what is the best, version of this? Well, how do we make this whole? How do we, improve upon it, even though it's different than what was originally intended? And I'm really proud of it because of what it did for us as a group. It brought all of us together in a very good way. And it did give us the insight on like what to do next and how to do things. Because it was something where we were creating the process while it was in motion. We jumped onto the movie train.
Yeah, and we had a great partner in Soapbox Films that were able to, they've worked so much with the Muppets that they were able to kind of help guide as well and give their
great
input, which
collaborators
is so helpful.
and artists at what they do in the visual effects and editing, how to like really help us turn your office into we're 6 performers all over the world telling our families to be quiet in the other room so we can record something. It was a very interesting time to be creating a new pathway for production. So we found a whole group of new fans I have friends that it was scheduled viewing with their kids.
Well, last year, the Muppets released their first ever Halloween special, Muppets Haunted Mansion, on Disney+. It was the first time that the Muppet Studio, correct me if I'm wrong, fully produced a project of this nature from start to finish.
Yeah.
Leigh, how did this special come about?
Yeah. We had some great partners at Disney+. When our previous projects with Disney+, we were filming before the platform had launched. So, we learned a lot from them, and they're huge supporters of the Muppets and of new Muppet content. But one of the executives at Disney Plus had said, "I would love to talk to you about a special, and it's my dream to see the Muppets do Halloween." I said, "Well, funny you mentioned that." Coming from Imagineering and being sort of so closely connected to Disney parks and resorts over the years, I had some contacts that were, there's always people who are sort of specialists on different attractions within parks and resorts. And so we had connected with a few of those folks and said, how would you feel if the Muppets and Haunted Mansion got together? Haunted Mansion has such a huge fan base. And then, of course, Muppets, huge. Do we all think that we could bring these two worlds together and, do the impossible, try and please everybody, try and let everybody feel like they've been respected? And we got huge support from Imagineering. They said, absolutely, let's do it. Let's see what you can come up with. So, and then it just kind of went very quickly from there. And I would say at every presentation where we were sort of, talking about this idea and should we do it, there was nothing but support from day one. So to do that and to have that connection, to me it was great because there was this tie to my previous world and then, my new world of the Muppets. So to have those two come together and be able to pull in the right people to navigate those waters was just an absolute joy. And just from the very first meeting, we think we've stumbled on something special here.
Yeah.
And I think it is, I think it's something we're very, very proud of.
Yeah, it was really, from just this kernel of a passing question in a hallway in the WDI building, like, Michael, what do you think of this? It was too like, yes, we should definitely be developing this. And then figuring out, okay, well, who should be the writers? Let's get that group together. Now let's pitch WDI and, the team that handles Haunted Mansion to see the excitement in their faces when we started to break it out. You could see them having ideas of like, okay, but again, just like we have guardrails, they have guardrails. So it is about finding that balance between, okay, well, what do their guardrails do to our ability in the creative space? But they were such good partners and so collaborative and wanted to, whenever an issue would pop up, they were additive. They would give suggestions, which then, Bill Beretta, Kirk Thatcher, Kelly Younger, our writers could absorb. We flowed still through Jim Lewis as well to be able to help always plus up. It really was this great development of team, to get just through the story part of it. And then after that, it was like, okay, now how do you do it? And that's where, we have very specific boxes that we have to fit into, and you start doing it from a standard approach. I can't count how many budgets I did for that project. But early on, it was a true hammer and nail approach. Like, how do you build these sets and what will they look like and how do we do this? And partway through the process, it was just like pretty obvious that wasn't a pathway that could get us to this project getting made. And I started taking meetings with producers that were now doing the Mandalorian process. I met with a person in Syracuse that had a system set up, and I'm like, oh, 3 of my performers are in New York. Maybe that's a pathway towards shooting it this way and landing in a box. And simultaneously, Bill Beretta comes to me and he's like, have you been watching these documentaries about the Mandalorian? I think there's something. I'm like, I've just started talking to people about this. And so right after that, Andrew Williams, our partners at Soapbox, came to us and said, hey, we're getting an AR wall and building it into our set. And we're just like, these 3 separate minds came to the same idea at the same time that I was trying my very best I wanted to deliver on this creative so badly, and I wasn't landing it from a budget and a schedule approach. And I wanted so badly to find a pathway for it. And so to have all 3 of us thinking of it at the exact same time and create this pathway that allowed the timeline to work and allowed the budget to work, and we got to do what I think, and I've heard from a multitude, Bill Beretta included, of this is the type of thing Jim would be doing. He would be finding how to utilize the new technology to tell stories with our characters. And it has its ups and downs, and is the first approach to it. But
learning curve.
But that said, I love the finished product. I love where we got. I'm very proud of it.
Oh, me too.
For knowing everything we went through to get there.
I am too, and I love that Muppet Studio logo. That's the first thing you see. I love it. It's so cool.
We wanted to make sure we would release that logo with that project as the real stamp of And this is the first one to go from ideation to the end. So, it was exciting and terrifying all at the same time because we were putting it out there. This is ours.
Well,
there's no one to blame but us.
But it was good, and I love there's in this case it was Bill, right? That Bill was kind of there for the creation of it and part of the writing, and he was as a producer and helped kind of. There was a Muppet Performer that was attached to that project, and that's kind of the way that the Muppet Studio is setting things up for future projects. Absolutely. That there would be a Muppet Performer or performers that would be involved early on, and then maybe walk a project through, depending on what it happens to be. And we've done it on a smaller scale. When we go to somebody else's show, it's kind of like that because the person, whether it's Eric doing Piggy on, The View, he's kind of involved early on in that creative, and has the right to give some input about Piggy's what she's going to be doing on The View, and it only serves that would be how we would walk through other projects, larger projects, with the Muppet Studio. We will be back with Leigh and Michael, but first, it's time to ask a puppeteer about not puppets.
Ask a puppeteer about not puppets.
On today's Ask a Puppeteer About Not Puppets, we've got a question for Alice Dinnean that has nothing to do with puppets. Alice Dinnean, if you could spend a year traveling the world, where are the places that you would most want to go?
I would like to go to Kyoto, Japan. That is one of the first places that I would go. Because I have seen pictures and heard tell of just the beautiful temples in the city and the ancient land. It's so, it's so beautiful that I'm going to embarrass myself. Was it General MacArthur in World War II was like, don't bomb Kyoto. Like they laid waste to all of Japan.
Like that.
But that was legendarily beautiful and it was preserved. And I want to go see it before and also I really love Japanese food and art and architecture and all that. And then there's a pilgrimage route through Japan that I would walk with my little backpack going to, and then I would wind up in Osaka, which I hear is quite a fun time, and then I would continue not straight south, a little off to one side, and go to New Zealand. That's the other place I really want to go.
Sounds like you've already got it planned out.
That's my next dream trip.
Okay.
And it would probably take a year, a couple months in Japan, and then the rest of the time I think I would wander around New Zealand and then Australia if I still had time.
Sounds great.
That part of the world I've never been to.
Yeah.
Never been to.
New Zealand's fantastic. It's beautiful.
Ask the puppeteer about not puppets.
We are back with the Muppets Studio. I love Muppets Haunted Mansion, and I love Haunted Mansion. I love Disney. I love going to the Disney parks. And there is this synergy between the Muppets and the Disney parks that I think a lot of fans on both sides would like to see more of, whether it's on Disney Plus or in the parks. And last Christmas, you mentioned this earlier, Leigh, but at Disneyland, there was the Muppet Christmas Carol Coach, which was this double-decker bus filled with singing Muppets that drove around. I guess it went down Main Street. Is that right?
Yeah, it went down Main Street.
How does it come about?
It was the team at Disneyland. They are Muppet super fans. They're friends. We've worked together for many years. So they knew that I had come into the Muppets world, and they called and said, hey, any chance we can play with the Muppets? I was like, let's do it. Yeah, for sure. And so we had their writer connect with Jim Lewis, and they presented this idea to us, and we thought, well, this is a little bit of fun. Let's see what we can do with this. And boy, I tell you, Michael and I were there for overnight rehearsals. Nothing quite like being on Main Street at 3:00 in the morning doing a rehearsal. But you know what was so much fun? So we were rehearsing the entire Christmas event. And so the parade was rehearsing as well as us. And so, we would have to sort of, wait for the parade to finish, then they'd have to wait for us to finish. Parade finished their final run through, and it must have been we'd been there since probably 10, 11 p.m. By now it's about 3, 4 in the morning. We come out on Main Street. We expect to go down down to the hub and around the hub, and it to be, just quiet and us. There were all the parade performers. They'd finished their shift. They'd quickly changed. Technicians, float drivers, all kinds of people who were there to support the parade had come out to be the audience for our last rehearsal show. And they were cheering, and just the camaraderie of all of these performers coming together, and, really this signal from Disneyland of being the people there welcoming the Muppets and showing us so freely how excited they were to have the Muppets as part of them for this Christmas series. And then we were there opening night, and just the reaction from the guests. Everybody was, facing the bus and watching the Muppets, and we were turned facing the guests and watching their reaction.
100%.
And it was just, people were so emotional, and they were laughing and singing along. We were like, oh, they're laughing at the right points. That's great. That's great news. And then it snowed, and it was just such a wonderful moment, and then just the fun and the fact that the Muppets could have fun with, inside jokes with the Disneyland guests as well, calling out to Audio Central, which the Disneyland guests know about, and my favorite part is Gonzo and Pepe were having a conversation about the Dapper Dans. And if you don't know the Dapper Dans at Disneyland, they're a barbershop quartet group that have been there, I believe, since Disneyland started. Their legacy at Disneyland. And, Gonzo coming to the realization that not all of the Dapper Dans are called Dan. And he met one called Isaac and one called Steve. And just this little conversation they have as they were driving off stage. And after the first show or two, guests realizing that, and then following the coach so they could continue to hear the jokes as they were driving off. That's the part that I love, that it's they're doing a show, but then there's always something unexpected and a little bit quirky that's, something different.
Yeah, and what, a little bit of a secret that I will give away here is that the Muppet performers, myself, Eric, Bill, Dave, Peter, and David, were not there. Our voices were there, but we have very skilled other Muppet performers that know our work and have been working alongside us for many, many years. Michael, can you talk about that a little bit? Why didn't I get to go to Disneyland?
Because you live very, very far away.
Interview. I just want to know.
You live very, very far away, and it was over 5 weeks of time. You wouldn't have wanted to be there anyway.
Right, and it wasn't every night either, right? It was
One day
only
a
like
week.
certain nights over those 5 weeks, and it just was impractical.
And look, this is another thing about the synergy that David and Leigh have brought to the group and how we're now in parks in this way. It really is amazing to get this opportunity to get in front of an entire new audience base in many ways, because and this is what I took away from being there on those nights. I was there for the opening night, watched all of our shows, same thing for the closing, the finale night. And the crowds got bigger and bigger from the first night to the last night. They got bigger and bigger. And like she said, we were less watching the parade at a certain point. We were more watching the crowd. And what I took away the most was seeing very, very happy parents that were just so immersed in, because they love our characters and they're already connected to our characters. But what I was seeing was the 6-year-old on the dad's shoulders that was hearing dad laugh and was experiencing in unison, like, this is making him really happy. Oh, look at mom. And then seeing them laugh too, because it was this great bridge to a whole new audience base by being integrated into the parks in this way. And that team, I couldn't speak more highly of. They ran the ship really, really well. And to have the pool of performers that you spoke about that are so thoughtful about our characters, you guys are obviously on speed dial with all of them. So if they have questions, once they were kind of cast to who they were, we knew that we could get to the right spot performance-wise. We had faith because it was not just some random, puppeteer putting on one of our characters. It was someone that already is integrated into our system. It gave us great confidence. And then you got to see it. Right. 2 days of rehearsals and an overnight was what we had. and they fully delivered. They were fantastic.
I'm assuming that the reaction from the parks were positive. I mean, might we get to do this kind of thing again, Leigh? Maybe at Disney World? That would be awesome.
I hope so.
It'd be cool.
It would be cool. I certainly saw from Disney World guests that they were very interested in why Disneyland got something so cool this year.
Yeah.
So,
well, who knows? Maybe in the future. And speaking of fans, the Muppets have a very vocal fan base. Sometimes it's good. Sometimes it's not good. I've experienced that myself. I'm just not just in recent years, but all throughout my time as a Muppet performer. Leigh, what is the relationship with the fan base like for Muppet Studio? I mean, there are some websites out there like Tough Pigs that are pretty open with their support, and they're pretty honest with their feedback. How do you navigate listening to the fans while still keeping honest to the plan that you've made?
Yeah, we do our best to maintain a connection with groups like Tough Pigs. And whenever we can, we will reveal information to them, maybe ahead of time, or, they represent our super fans. And so we want to acknowledge that. We want to sort of cultivate that relationship as much as we can and give them what they want. Yeah, they're very honest with their feedback. But I think there's a plan that, as we said in the beginning, there's a plan that we have that we think is the right way to go with the Muppets. And that's really our North Star. That's where we're trying to stay focused. And so, I think listening to fans is important because, it can adjust nuances. It can let us know, what, it does seem like people enjoyed when we offered them something as opposed to something else, or, hey, didn't they share some honesty with us on that one? But look, it's to me, it's all we take it all try and take it in a very measured way. But I think it's this constant reality check of, we just have to get out there, know what we stand for, try and remain true to that. And, hopefully the fans will see that they will see truth and sincerity in what we're trying to do. And we're not going to fool ourselves that we're going to ever be able to please absolutely everybody. But on the flip side of that, we're also nothing without the fans. So I don't read everything, but there are often times where I will say, okay, well, to myself, this is about to launch tonight. I'm going to just keep an eye on social media, and we can we have some people that can help us do that and sort of let us know, well, what was the reaction to this? Was it mostly positive? Mostly neutral? Don't love to see negative, but I do like to understand, well, if there was any negative reaction, why? And is it something that we need to talk about and we need to consider for our next project? Or was it maybe someone's sort of, personal opinion, and it was, a small minority of the fans, but if the greater group seem to be saying that they're enjoying it, then that's how we're guided. So it's a balance, and it's not always easy. No. So I think that's us having a plan and making sure we're sticking to our plan is so important.
Yeah, I think it reinforces what we've been talking about, where it is us so tightly connected with the performers and communicating about the characters and being true to the characters. I think we'll show the fans that we're being thoughtful about it. We're trying to be the truest version. And it is with direct input, from all our performers, including Dave Goelz, who's been around since the very beginning, that there's nobody that's been Gonzo but him. And we're doing a special about Gonzo.
And he's not shy with his feedback.
No.
That's right.
He's
not at all.
He's not shy, and which is great.
Exactly. It's why I think we hopefully the fans will agree after seeing Muppets Haunted Mansion as the first thing that's generated with this iteration of the Muppet Studios as we're trying to be very true to the characters. We are incorporating the performer voice, and Leigh has created these guardrails and things so that we are delivering the truest version of the Muppets to our fan base. And hopefully that starts to resonate with our fans, that Disney is doing everything we can to make this the best, deliver.
Leigh, what kind of projects do you see the Muppet Studio doing overall? Do we get more shows like Muppets Now, or specials like Muppets Haunted Mansion, or other kinds of series that we have not seen from the Muppets yet?
Yes.
All of it.
Great. Now Muppets Now had kind of a sort of a Muppet show feel to it. Can fans, because I know that they would want me to ask this, can they ever expect to see the Muppets do the Muppet Show someday?
Well, I was a huge fan of the Muppet Show, so the fans certainly don't have to convince me that the Muppet Show was, and in my view, still is one of the greatest shows ever. And the fact that I can sit down now and watch it with my kids is surreal, because I have these memory flashbacks of being in Australia with my brother when we were kids, watching it, and now I'm sitting here with my children watching it. So, I think that classic variety show is something that will always resonate with audiences. And to me, I love, it's almost like seeing the Muppets back in their natural habitat, right? It's, it's where you expect them to be. So, I love the Muppet Show. I think we're in our plan. As I said, we're sort of looking at it on multi-levels. What are the big things we're going for, and then, what are the little surprise appearances that we're going for, and then everything in the middle as well. So there's more to come, but we're just not quite ready to reveal it just yet.
Yeah, not quite yet, but but the idea is that there might be series out there. There might be specials.
Absolutely.
There might be one-offs. There might be,
Yes.
who knows? The idea is, though, what I'm gathering and what I gathered all that time ago at that first meeting is that we want to meet the fans where they remember and love the Muppets. And it's a place where it hits them right in the heart, makes them laugh, and I think that I can... I feel like I can confidently say from where I am sitting that I think the Muppets have a bright future ahead of them. I feel that we have confident drivers at the wheel who know the road ahead. You guys, the curves, the dead ends, the highways that we can speed along, and I had to write that down because I thought it was pretty
That's very good.
I've never been so confident about something. I really haven't. And I think that the Muppet Studio has proven this in just a few years that you've been in the driver's seat, Leigh. And all of the Muppet performers are very fond of you both and believe in the vision of the Muppet Studio. And we are buckled in and ready to go.
Well, that's very kind of you. And look, it may not always be the smoothest road ahead. There could be some bumps. But
That's right.
But it's, as Michael said earlier, one of the things we always tag back to is, what was the original intent? And what Michael said was, we heard from people who had actually met Jim Henson that filming on an AR wall is something Jim would have absolutely done. He would have embraced new technology and embraced new directions. And so, we will be going forth with that in mind, of embracing the future, but staying a little truer to the past as well.
I love that. Okay, it's time for some rapid fire questions.
Dear.
Are you
Okay.
both ready?
I don't know.
It's okay. This is no pressure. Okay, here we go.
Yes.
Leigh, what is the hardest part about leading the Muppet Studio?
Having production meetings with the 6 core performers, it's like herding cats. Especially when you and Dave Goals are together, and it's just constant.
It's comedy. It is comedy.
Okay, all right,
It's
fair enough.
comedy
Yeah,
gold,
no.
Michael. Comedy
It
gold.
really is.
But we've only got this
Well,
long.
come on, guys.
Only
You
have
can't do a
30 minutes.
90-minute meeting every time.
I understand. I know. Okay, Michael, what is the hardest part about being a part of the Muppet Studio for you?
I think it is educating independent productions of what needs to occur in order to achieve the best finished product. It is that education curve on every single project. how it has to seep through into multiple layers of a crew. It's not just getting buy-in from a producer, but you have to also get all the other departments to understand why.
Michael, what is the easiest part of being part of the Muppet Studio?
The easiest part is working with all the performers. Yes, they eat up a lot of time in meetings, but no, truly, you guys are incredibly collaborative. You're supportive. I think things are better because how tightly you guys are integrated into it. And, coming from features and television, you guys are the performers, you're the talent. Maybe this has to do with puppeteering, but the way that you have to give yourself over to a partner and allow them to help bring this character to life, you guys are that same way when it comes to developing projects and working through the nuts and bolts of scheduling and making things happen. You're very collaborative and thoughtful. And so you guys make my job easier, and I look forward to my job because I get to work with all of you with these characters.
Very kind of you, Leigh. What's the easiest part for you?
Oh, gosh.
Working with me.
You know what? Okay. Yeah, working with Michael. It's, I tell you, and this might sound a little bit saccharine, but it is honest. It's not hard to get out of bed in the morning and go to work to a job that you enjoy so much. It is challenging, and it is, not every day is easy, but it's definitely a job that you can easily commit to. And that's, how lucky.
Yeah.
Not everyone gets to say that in their life.
Truly.
Leigh, what is one of your favorite things about being part of the Muppets?
Telling people that I'm part of the Muppets.
That's a good answer. I like that. Michael, what about you? Favorite thing?
So coming from features and television and stuff, I did not know that I was going to love this so much, but it's seeing the characters live in person, interacting with people, fans, crew, whoever. Just a character. You guys keep the character alive between takes. Some of the funniest bits happen between takes, but also watching people have the inability to control nostalgia just washing over them when they meet a character. You performers somehow disappear and you're right below them, and all they can connect with is that character. It is the greatest thing about my job, is witnessing that and knowing that I'm a part of making people feel that way. It's amazing. That's my favorite part of the job, is going to the Royal Albert Hall with you and seeing fans reacting to meeting Kermit. That's the stuff that does it for me.
So the late, great Muppet performer Jerry Nelson said to me once, Sesame Street and the Muppets are great, but you always need to have something that is your own, that comes from you, that you create. So Michael, what is that for you?
I still write screenplays and scripts and, in the outside of Muppet sphere. And so I like being creative. And so I continue to write a multitude of different genres that is not Muppets related. So that, and I guess, technically I created them. So my children, spending time with my kids, is the greatest thing I could ever. Yeah. That's the greatest thing I've ever done. Followed by the Muppets.
Yeah, completely counts. Leigh, what is that thing for you?
I was going to say what Michael said. It's stepping away from, the work and spending time with kids. They're the great equalizers, right? They'll be honest. They don't care what I've done during the day. They're like, we're going to tell you the truth, Mom. Right. So having the kids and watching them grow up and see the world through their eyes.
Well, Leigh and Michael, I am so grateful to you for everything. But I just thank you so much for talking with me today.
Definitely.
I hope you had a good time.
Yes. Well, we got to chat with you without having Dave Goals in the middle, so
Oh, my gosh, I know.
I love Dave.
He is relentless.
You two are relentless.
Yeah. We all love Dave.
We all love Dave.
Thanks, guys. Thanks. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Well, that's it. That's Below the Frame. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode where I'll be speaking with Jan Nelson. Get updates about Below the Frame and Muppets and Sesame Street on my Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok accounts at WelcomeMattV, or just search my name. Below the Frame is produced by me, Matt Vogel. The theme song was written by Stephanie DeBruzzo and performed by my band, The Mighty Weaklings. The podcast artwork was created by Dave Hulteen at Dave Hulteen Design. Thanks to Leigh Slaughter, Michael Steinbach, and the Muppet Studio. Plus, David Rudman, Alice Dinnean, and as always, my son Jack for being part of this episode. And thanks to you, the fans, for listening. I'm Matt Vogel. We'll see you next time when we go below the frame. Bye-bye.